The Mummy is a 1999 American adventure horror film written and directed by Sommers. It stars Brendan Fraser, Rachel Weisz, John Hannah, and Arnold Vosloo. The plot follows Rick O'Connell as he escorts a librarian and her brother to the Egyptian desert, to the ancient city of the dead, where they accidentally awaken a mummy hell-bent on vengeance and destruction. I've pretty much always been a fan of the first two Mummy movies, and the Mummy Returns was playing at Regal Theaters. I think it was a couple of weeks ago for its 25th anniversary, which I saw, and I really was in the mood over those last couple of weeks for some of my favorite like late '90s to early 2000s blockbusters. And I probably had not seen this film for close to 20 years, I would imagine. So it was interesting to kind of hold up this recent watch next to how I remembered it, of course. So as you probably know, this is a very loose reboot of the 1932 Boris Karloff film. The general plot here is similar in ways, but completely different in execution. They did use the 1932 plot where Imhotep, the resurrected mummy, is searching for his lover, or at least who he believes to be the reincarnation of her. In my opinion, respect and care, regarding the original film is pretty much on full display here, while making it entirely its own film. Something you obviously can't say about all remakes, of course, and I should probably clarify, I don't really like the original Mummy film. And I hate to admit that, because I like the story and I love the character, one of the most classic monsters of all time. And I love Boris Karloff, and I've only really seen it once or twice. I think just once, to be honest. I just found it to be really, really boring. Please don't hate me. I haven't given up on it or anything. I own it on Blu-ray. I think I even have 2 copies. I'm going to give it another chance when the time is right. So first, let's start with the mummy himself, Imhotep, played this time by Arnold Vosloo, who at the time I thought was an odd choice, mainly just because at the time I'd never heard of him. I'm still not really even that familiar with him. I've seen him in a couple of things. But that said, he is a perfect choice. He doesn't have a ton of lines, and when he does, he speaks ancient Egyptian, which is cool. I think he has a pretty imposing presence, and this version of Imhotep is quite different than the 1932 version, of course. Arnold Vosloo's version is honestly more comparable to like Dracula, or even I think a better comparison would be Count Orlok. Like, he's the complete bringer of destruction and plagues, but there's a girl he likes, so, we all have a soft side. So he's resurrected as a mummy, and he has to kill people to regain his human form, kind of like Julia from Hellraiser 2, which was an interesting, thing, since Clive Barker was actually slated to direct this in the early 90s, with George Romero before him, even in the late 80s. It's crazy. This is something I don't think I knew until recently. I didn't know this Mummy remake had gone back to the late 80s. So like a decade before it actually happened. It sounds like this version of the Mummy was supposed to be like lower budget horror initially. And I do wonder what that would have been like. Mick Garris and Joe Dante were attached also in the mid-90s. It's just crazy how many scripts and ideas were tossed out. I wonder if they exist somewhere. I'm sure they do. So I'm pretty sure this was the movie to eventually kick off that whole dark universe thing where Universal was trying to bring back the classic monsters. That never really happened. We did have the Wolfman in 2010. We also had Paul Verhoeven's Hollow Man in 2000, but I don't think that was a Universal production. But anyways, back in '99, I actually wasn't watching a ton of horror. I know I've said that here before. I was 17. I didn't really get into horror, like, seriously until, like, my early 20s. It just kind of happened that way. So, but I was a Brendan Fraser fan since at least the early 90s, and I remain one to this day. But anyways, to me, this version of The Mummy is a bit of a minor classic. I think its status would be stronger if it weren't for its flaws, which, to be fair, are mostly in the extremely dated CGI and visual effects. There's a lot of CGI, unfortunately, and just about none of it holds up. I shouldn't say that. A lot of it doesn't. But to counter that, we have some amazing shots and cinematography, and I always get vibes at least at times with certain shots. You know, I got vibes of classic epic films of the old days. You know, this is shot out in the desert. Ultimately, this is just a fun adventure in the vein of Indiana Jones, and Brendan Fraser's O'Connell character is a kind of a direct throwback to characters like Indy and Han Solo. And on that note, Han Solo and Princess Leia just have to be a direct influence on Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz's characters. And also on a visual standpoint, you know, they both just very much look the part of, 1920s characters, in kind of like that classic way. So excellent casting choices, in more than one way. So I'm giving The Mummy a solid 3 out of 4. 3 out of 4 stars, man. It would probably be like a 3.5 if it weren't for all the poorly dated CGI. But despite that, I think this movie holds up as an absolutely fun adventure with some horror touches, great characters, and a great villain, and a mostly unheard of at the time Arnold Vosloo, who I would pretty much only know from the two Darkman sequels, which I wouldn't actually see until years later. I think I saw those Darkman sequels within the last 5 years, I think. But anyways, for more Stephen Sommers fun, I would also mention his 1998 film Deep Rising for a cool sea monster creature feature, and also the less good but still watchable Mummy Returns from 2001, which I'll be reviewing next. So cheers, guys, and I'll see you at the multiplex. Subscribe right now, please.